we talk a lot about sustainability, we use the S word a lot as if it is synonymous with environmental, and we all know that's not correct. And it would seem that it would be natural to integrate into that the social piece of this, and that's not always easy to do, but it's becoming a critical part of the conversation, and here to have that conversation, to lead that conversation, is President and CEO of BSR, my good friend, Aaron Kramer.
Hi, everybody. And I would like to invite also my good friend, Gabi Zedlmayer, the Chief Progress Officer at HP. And first of all, congratulations to GreenBiz and Joel and the team for a characteristically good job. A great group of people here in the audience and hopefully on stage. And looking forward to this discussion, which I think is really important. So given this crowd, I think that there are some numbers that all of you are probably familiar with. There's 350, which is both ppm and now .org. There's, of course, 2C, 2 degrees Celsius. Everyone here is familiar with the meaning of all of those numbers. And I wanted to frame the discussion by throwing out a few additional numbers for you. The first is 663 million. And it's a nice round number. It happens to be the number of people who, according to the World Bank, have moved out of poverty over the last 20 years. And I think that's really crucially important because to the point made earlier when Joel got the day going, there probably is a sense that we've plateaued in some ways, but I think it's also absolutely crucial to remember that an immense amount of progress is being made on really important issues, and the fact that 1 out of 10 people on this planet, or the equivalent of 1 out of 10, 10% of the world's population has moved out of poverty in 20 years, is something that's quite literally never happened before in human history. There's some other numbers that show the link between social and environmental questions. There's the number, and this one is a range, between 300 and 500 billion. And that's the number that the Harvard School of Public Health estimates in dollars, the cost to the American economy from the use of coal, and a good deal of that because of public health issues. There's another number, 2.3%. I didn't just pull these out of my head, by the way. I did a little research. 2.3%, and that's the estimate of the amount of GDP loss that China experiences because of water stress, and that goes directly to China's ability to feed itself, in addition to employ the vast number of people who need jobs in China every year. And I think the ultimate number, though, is 9 billion, which is the number of people we'll have on the planet by the middle of the century. And sustainability is important because that is the best path to ensuring that all 9 billion of those people can live in dignity and with their basic needs met. So I think this presents a really strong case for looking at the link between social and environmental dimensions of sustainability. People talk a lot about E, S, and G. All those things are most effective when they're taken together, and the G isn't officially in the title of this session, but governance is very important as well. This is how BSR has thought about sustainability for all of our history. And then before I go to Gabi, I'm going to do a little bit of a segue here and point out that we always hear people, planet, and profit, those 3 Ps. And they're very important. It's become a little bit of a sustainability cliche in some ways. But for a long time, I have felt that there is another P that has been omitted to everyone's detriment, and that's progress. Because what gets people excited? What do NGOs fight for? What do businesses try to build each and every day? What does the average citizen think of? Sustainability, as many people were mentioning, is a term that's hard to understand. Human progress is something that is easy to understand and it inspires us. So I think it's very interesting then that we have Gabi with us because she has, to my knowledge, the first person with title in the corporate world of Chief Progress Officer. And so that's quite interesting, and it speaks to the way HP is thinking about sustainability and with the concept of living progress. And so, Gabi, I want to start out by asking you, Where did the concept of living progress come from? What does it mean at HP?
So the name is new, but the idea has existed within HP for 75 years. We actually have our 75th anniversary this year. And it was from the beginning that Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard said that the betterment of society cannot be left to a few. It's a responsibility we all share. And in the first year when they created the company, they said, let's take a step back and think about why companies exist. Sure, we have to maximize profitability and shareholder wealth, but we also have to create a value for society. And the interesting thing is that Dave Packard said when he showed up in meetings with fellow CEOs and the leading management thinkers at the time, he was literally laughed out of the room, So in 1957, we had global citizenship already as one of our corporate objectives. That meant it was very much linked to the company's strategy, just like customer satisfaction or profitability. And that's quite a long time ago. So for us, this is not just a way to mitigate risk, or it's not just a governance question. We always took a look at this as creating value for the company, for long-term growth, as well as creating a value for society. But we thought the name global citizenship reflects a little bit this philanthropic thought, or maybe I pay a tax or I have a responsibility. And we look at it very differently. We think if we bring together our people's skills and our technology, we can really advance the growth of HP just like we can advance health, education, and environment, these big questions, social questions, societal questions that we need to address.
So if anyone is here from Facebook, go tell Mark Zuckerberg that 60 years from now, someone will be talking about something he said in a meeting as well. These things at their best last. So let's get a little more specific for a minute. When you think about progress, what do you have in mind?
So the important aspect here is that we need to look at different dimensions. In living progress, we look at human progress, and this is really about people's health and well-being and providing better access and delivery to health. Then we take a look at economic progress, which is about thriving individuals or economies. We know that education relates one-to-one to the well-being of a person or to the growth of a nation. So we focus a lot on education and training. And then, of course, the environment, to have the environment in mind with everything that we do. And at the end of the day, you have to look at all of these dimensions, because there is not a single environmental problem that doesn't have social and educational aspects to it. So a good example is a great partnership that we just started with Conservation International last year. And I have to say, I always thought that health was the last frontier of IT, but I think it's environmental research. How much stuff really got done manually in disjointed different databases. And we saw that it took the wonderful researchers from Conservation International months, like big teams. It would take them half a year to analyze data. And here I want to specifically address a project that we're doing in the rainforests to better understand what is happening in these rainforests. So we said, okay, so if we bring some of the big data analytics from Vertica, which is an HP company, to this play, we can speed up everything they do by at least 90%. But then we also brought enterprise services in and created a dashboard that is an early warning system about everything that's going on in these rainforests. So what you have to imagine that in 16 rainforests around the world, there are these camera traps, and they take pictures, constantly taking pictures. And there is a massive millions of pictures that need to be evaluated. And what took these, teams of 20, 30 people about 6 months can now be done by one person in the matter of a few hours. And as I said, it's an early warning system, so you have a dashboard where you can take a look exactly what's happening where. And if you think about it, again, this might be addressing the rainforest and what's going on there, and people might think about this as an environmental issue, but the air that we breathe here in Arizona, the beautiful air when we go outside, 40% of that air comes straight from the tropical rainforests. 80% of this gorgeous food that we eat here initiates in the tropical rainforests, and just about everything that goes into the medication that we take. And at the same time as this is happening, a lot of these species disappear and we don't even know about it. So when you Google certain species right now, and I know what we found out just in the last year from working together with Conservation International, it makes me really happy to see that we now know what's happening to the western gorilla in Uganda, or the Malaysian sun bear, or the agile mangabey. These are all animals I didn't even know existed beforehand, because we now have real metrics, and then you can do something about it. So we think this is a great example that shows that it's environmental, but it's also health. It's all about education.
Well, and almost every innovation in technology has helped us understand the connections between things. So this is a great example, and a great example why social and environmental connections are so important. Companies often operate within silos. We all know that. So when you need to make the case inside HP that social issues, environmental issues, indeed governance issues are connected, what sort of barriers do you run into with respect to the way the company is organized, or other things that may make it hard?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And the company is huge. We have over 300,000 people, and we're in 170 countries. So when I want to get something done, I have to have metrics in hand. I think that usually helps a lot with HP, that very much has an engineering background, and a lot of what we do is just based on numbers. And so when I go about asking for help for specific projects, I try to have that homework done as best as I can. So a couple of years back, we started thinking about our ecological footprint and how we can get a better grasp. And so we worked with other outside consultancies and companies to come up with the entire footprint, 1, 2, and 3. So now that I know that 4% is in my own operations, 36 is in the supply chain, and 60 is in the products and solutions that we offer, it's much easier to go and work with these teams and just basically say, here are the facts, here is what we need to do. It's easier to also create goals, to have a supply chain goal when you know what's going on in your supply chain. So I think that really helps a lot.
But is that sort of characterized as and that's for the environmental people to figure out, as opposed to something that cuts across?
No, environmental people, we don't have an environmental department. We don't have a chief sustainability officer per se. It's everywhere in the company. It's whether it's at the regional level or at the country level, or whether it's in the business groups, whether it's in the labs, whether it's part of my team. So it really goes pretty much across the company.
So you talked about measuring. Let's talk about the social side, because we at BSR, we hear all the time from companies saying, well, it's more difficult to measure. There are a number of consumer-facing companies that talk in one form or another of improving the lives of 1 billion people around the world. Great goal, really, really hard to measure. How do you get at that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. It is difficult to measure, because one of the things that really happens in the social space is you cannot do anything by yourself. So you always have to work with local government and local nonprofits and other companies actually to create the ecosystem that can come up with a solution. So it is difficult, because you will need data from different pieces in different places in order to sort of have an overall understanding of what's going on. But having said that, I do think that a lot of the dashboards that we've created around our social programs have made a tremendous difference. An example is the work that we do with the Clinton Health Access Initiative in Kenya. So in Kenya, when children are born, they're tested for HIV. Usually it takes up to between 4 and 6 months for that blood to come back to the health worker or the mother, because everything is a manual project. Blood gets taken into an envelope, courier to the labs, analyzed, back into the envelope, back to where the children and the mothers are. So we've put in an IT infrastructure and basically built a health cloud, and we're now able to do this within 19 days, which is well enough time to put the baby, if the baby is HIV positive, on antiretrovirals. But what we've done also is we've created a dashboard together with the students in Nairobi from Strathmore University, so that everybody, whether it's the Clinton Health Initiative, whether it's the government, whether it's us, any other stakeholders have instant access to the data, so we don't have to call and ask for more reports, because it's automatic reporting on this process where we know how many kids have been tested, and you know, all of the vital statistics that we need to know. So technology can be an enabler. It's never going to be the solution in and by itself because you have to make it work locally, but it can help a lot in putting the data forward.
Let me play the role of in-house cynic for a moment and say, okay, Gabi, you've talked about a really great example. It sounds like it's a lot of really good things, but I understand how the footprinting exercise is going to help HP's bottom line. I don't understand what the business benefit of that project is. How do you make that case?
Okay, so we have a number of business units that are very famous, like the fact that we do imaging and printing, or the PCs or the servers. So when I travel around the world, sometimes people, you know, the Russian guy the other day, he said, oh, the printing company. And yes, printing is a great part of the portfolio, but we have, you know, almost 200,000 people in services. We do storage, networking, we have the entire portfolio. And for us to showcase that to governments, to ministries of health, this work does actually transform what the perception of the company. So the Ministry of Health in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, where we've run these programs, now is thinking about us when they have bigger tenders to give away. So it changes the perception. And what also cannot be underestimated is how you get your employees involved. We know that retaining the best of employees is an issue that I'm sure many of you have. And if you have these type of programs only on the paper and you don't live them, you know, it doesn't work, especially not for the young people. So we have a lot of volunteers across the organization that help us to get these programs done. When people ask about the resources and aren't you always constrained, I have to say yes and no, because I will always go out and get more resources from volunteers in the organization. And a last point here, because I found that so amazing. We just came back from a trip to Haiti with 4 retirees that full-time work with me on a project in Haiti, and they're now on to the next project in Rwanda. So it's, you know, when you ask for it, you get the help.
Sustainability is not just for young people anymore.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Very, very good. I mean, I know there's a lot of work being done in sort of radically changing the server business at HP. So presumably, so that's interesting. It's the whole grow your own competition idea in a sense. And how does sustainability play into that? Because you touched on innovation as a core element here.
It's absolutely critical. And if you think about the fact that every 2 days now, we produce as much information as all of mankind until 2003. Every 2 days. It's massive. And you don't have to be a brain trust to figure out, you know, as you extrapolate that over the next few years, you have to invest another $10 to $20 billion into additional data centers that would span the entire length of Manhattan. And because if you don't have enough alternative resources, you need to even build power plants, and then you have to plant over 3 million acres of forests to clean the air. I mean, all of that is just not sustainable. So we have developed a new server that's called Moonshot, which is 89% more energy efficient, 89% more energy, 80% less space, and 77% more affordable, cheaper than our traditional lines. So it's very disruptive to the traditional server lines, but this is exactly what needs to happen in order to power the cloud, which is the 5th largest country if you compare it to you know, the energy using countries. So I think it's an absolute necessity. It's not a nice to have. I mean, we have to rethink and really disrupt the current businesses in order to find solutions that address some of these issues in the energy space.
One more question before I throw it over to Elaine to see if we have any questions on the sidebar. And HP's worked for a long time, and we've had the privilege of working with you on this, on working on conditions in the manufacturing supply chain. What have you learned there in terms of the overlap between social and environmental issues, number one, but also the opportunity, the economic opportunity that's generated by virtue of this extended supply chain that you catalyze?
Absolutely. So a lot of learnings from the supply chain. We work very closely with the supply chain. Our supply chain is, I don't know, close to $70 billion worth. So one good example that shows, again, that it spans across all of these different pillars is the work that we've done in China, where we used to manufacture just in the coastal areas, But what we realized is that the workers, 80% of the workers had to come from a completely different part of China, very far away, and they weren't well working over there in the coastal areas. They had to pay inflationary prices for whatever gets paid in these areas. They didn't have their family, they didn't have the food, they were out of their own culture. So we said, rather than bringing the people to those coastal areas, why don't we bring manufacturing to where these people live? And created, of course, this economic progress for folks in areas like Chongqing. Health-wise, people had much less absenteeism, much better for people to be in their own culture. And then we said, we need to find out a different way to transport our products back to Europe. So we rediscovered the old Silk Railroad, and are now transporting our PCs via train back to Europe, which is a lot more energy efficient than what we did with air, and also with ocean freight. It's also much quicker than ocean freight. So overall, again, environmental impact or progress there, progress for people, their health, and also creating economic opportunities.
Excellent. Elaine, do you have any questions?
So one sort of tongue-in-cheek is, how does one actually become a Chief Progress Officer? That sounds pretty awesome.
How do you become one, or what was it?
Yeah, how does one become a Chief Progress Officer?
You have to set your mind to it. And that's really, honestly, that's what I think is really, really important. And it's one of those, hopefully also new 21st century skills that people need to have. This is a changing world, and you need to know exactly where you want to go. And when I worked for Compaq originally, and HP then bought Compaq 10 years ago. And I looked at HP, and there was a lady that had this job, and I said, this is the job I want to have, because I felt like with a company like HP in the back, you can really make a difference and a change to people's lives. So I think it's all about setting your mind to something and then working at getting there.
You can go home and tell everybody working at home that the audience said you have an awesome job. So that's pretty
I think
good.
I have the best job in the world anyway.
It's pretty good.
So another question is, how does HP deal with the disruption caused by radical innovation?
You have to, radical innovation is disruptive innovation, and I think you have to disrupt before somebody else disrupts your product innovations. You better do it yourself. And so absolutely, this project Moonshot was very disruptive, and we're glad that it's one of our products and not one of the competition's.
Another question is really more about justification related to the bottom line. So do you consider social projects throughout the world as a point of intangible value created as goodwill or some other intangible on the balance sheet?
No, what we do is we have specific measures across the company depending on the nature of the project, where we then, whatever spells out success. A lot of it, as I said earlier, has to do with employees and engaging employees, motivating employees. And we have a lot of different statistics there that showcase that people have a higher morale, they're much more likely to stay with the company, and we've really done a lot of that work. When it comes to some of these other projects, we're just doing a sales evaluation right now because we really wanted to see whether there is an official business case behind it. We have a lot of different examples, but this is a more systematic way of looking at it. But we're not done yet. We're in the midst of it.
If I can jump in on that, I think it is undeniable that measuring some of these social benefits is messier than measuring some of the environmental benefits, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
And in fact, we heard Richard Mattson talking about the integrated reporting model, which looks at 6 different kinds of capital, and I think you've touched on at least 2 of them, in addition to financial capital, intellectual capital and social capital.
Absolutely.
And so those are things that are very, very, very real. It is much harder to measure, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
Yeah, and we're getting better at it, I think. Not perfect yet.
So another question via Bizzabo, how do you compare the cloud to a physical country?
Oh, this is, I don't know who came up with it, but out of all of the countries in the world, if you take up the energy that is burned up by cloud computing, it would make the 5th largest country, I think, 5th or 6th largest country, more than all of the other 191 countries that follow the 5th largest countries. So it's an immense amount that it eats up, and that's why we said, we have to be radical in the technology that we develop in order to make sure that we can tackle that. Just as one example to put that into perspective, we've put all of HP.com on Project Moonshot, and we get 300 million hits a day, and this entire system runs on the equivalent of 12 light bulbs now. So that's how it's
Those are some fine light bulbs.
It's revolutionized 61.
One last question. We've talked a lot about innovation. We've talked a lot about how social environmental issues are flowing together. And you have the title Chief Progress Officer. So what is some progress that you think we should be looking for 5-10 years out that will help us make some great leaps on all this?
I think a lot of it comes to really creating these partnerships and even better partnerships, because a lot has been talked about it, a lot has been written about it, but when I go out there, I don't see it really working as well as it needs to. This is not anything that anybody can do by themselves, and to become more efficient there and to build those ecosystems to tackle some of these solutions. I think with technology as an enabler, we can get much further, but technology in and by itself cannot do it. You really have to come together and work these different partnerships, whether it's governments or nonprofits or companies, and really make it work. We haven't tackled that yet. We haven't gotten there yet.
Leadership requires partnership. That has traditionally been a little counterintuitive, but I think you're absolutely right. And I also think our time is up. So, Gabi, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.